Welcome to another
Texas
episode of the Texas Authors TV show.
Discover new authors, discover great books, any genre you love. Come take a look, hosted by fellow authors. Real talk, real spark, quick fun spotlights right from the start. Watch it anytime, share it when you do. Texas Authors TV.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Texas Authors TV show. And this is your host, Beyond Bourgeois. We have with us Bill Sanford, who has written a series of books, and he won an award for it just recently. So we're glad to have you with us, Bill. And why don't we start off with the very first question? What got you into writing?
Okay, well, I'll tell you right now, and thanks for having me on this evening on your podcast. I do appreciate this. Okay, well, interestingly enough, I was 14 years of age when I began reading historical fiction. I was bored one summer, and I thought, hey, this would be a pretty good time to get started on this. And sure enough, I was captivated, you might say, by the idea of the coming together of his history as well as fiction as well. So I've been looking at that most of my life, and I thought, well, I'll be not getting any younger, so I think it would be time for me to start my book series. I've always wanted to do that. And so I was inspired by the books of James Michener, particularly the Source. I think that was his first. And it comes as with his books combined fiction, blending with real events, real people, and compelling narrative. So I've been very interested in that, and I had an opportunity to do it. So I thought, okay, now's a good time.
So did that immediately start you on your first book, or just start writing other stories?
Well, actually, it did get started me on my first book. The interesting thing about it is that after the first book was written, honestly, I had hoped to make it all one book. And then it just occurred to me that, look, I've got a lot more to write here than just one book. There's a lot more to it than this. So I had to expand it. And by expanding it, I created 5 books that represented different eras of our historical civilization.
All right, so let's start with the first one. What is that first book all about?
Okay, well, the Books of Jasher is an historical saga, which is centered on an historian by the name of Benjamin Jasher. Actually a real historical figure mentioned in the Old Testament. In the series, Noah, the ancient prophet of old, commissioned Jasher to record human history, and he grants him a long life to do it. So he is a long-lived person. In book 1, The Scar of Cain, we open up in 2028 Israel area. And as Jasher is a mysterious antiquities dealer who winds up enlisting 2 professors from, interestingly enough, the University of Texas to translate his ancient texts. So his story exposes an insidious ancient brotherhood led by Cain of old, determined to erase men's freedom and choice and control civilizations. And the first book ends with a great flood, but Cain survives only to influence the future eras ahead. And that really provides a segue, you might say, into the next book. Okay, and in fact, all the books that follow. Do you want me to?
So before you go into the next book, I have a question, because you said that Jasper had hired a couple of professors from UT. So
Yes.
this is a modern day kind of style book. Is that correct?
Yes, the first book starts out as an introduction to his overall plan and his overall history. And in it, we find that Jasher, the antiquities dealer, is living in Israel. And he notifies one of the historians and the translators from the University of Texas. And the translator goes over to Israel in order to find out really what it's all about. And Jasher there, he turns it over pretty much to the professor there to take a look at his first set of records. The professor is intrigued because obviously this history goes back millennia, and as a result of that meeting in Israel, they combine together and create um, an opportunity there for both of them to work together. And both of them actually fly back to the United States with the first set of records. And there they begin the translation process. During the process, they find one other professor at the University of Texas. And he is a linguist of ancient languages. And so between the three of them, they're translating the records into modern day, compatible to modern day interests. And so that's pretty much how it goes. After the first one, there were other records involved, and they wind up actually moving their translation process to an island in the Caribbean, and there they complete the whole set from there.
No, you weren't joking that Jasper was given a long life. I mean, a millennium is a long time. When you first said that, I thought, well, maybe it just, he's 100 years old. But no, he's really
Very
old.
long lived, okay? And this was actually done in order to allow him the opportunity to finish the entire series. Um, when a person turns over a set of plates or a set of history, I mean, many times the people that take over from there tend to have a different writing and translation style. And so in this way, the continuity was there built into the process. And Jasher was the sole uh, writer as well as translator of the plates that he was involved with. So there was that
Yeah, over a
continuity.
millennium, the language changes and stuff. So yeah, it's a good thing he was around. So you said they went to the Caribbean to finish it off, and this, I assume, leads us into the second book.
Yes, the second book. And the second book is an actually picks up where the Great Flood left off. It the second book. Let's see. I want to make sure I've got this correct, which is the shadow of the scar. Okay, and the shadow of the scar represents the time period of let's say from the ancient Sumerians forward to the Babylonians, Romans, and that civilization moving forward. And so it really does color an incredible period of time and the eras. Unfortunately, for the sake of putting the book together in a more detailed, but at the same time comprehensive way, I couldn't obviously cover every possible civilization, but I covered those that seemed to be the most relevant for the presentation that I had for this book, which was the shadow of the scar.
So far, it sounds like you had to do a lot of research for these books. Is that correct?
Yes, they did, and really, there's a reason for that. Aside from the fact that I just enjoy the research, historical research, is that I wanted to ensure that there was a certain amount of integrity with my book, so that I wasn't introducing anything wild or outlandish to the process of history. For example, I didn't want to introduce anything like aliens or anything like that, or fantasy. And so I wanted to make sure that it was consistent. My narrative was consistent with historical, uh, the actual historical history that we do have. So I wanted to make sure that the background what actually occurred and that it would be something easily relatable to by most of the readers. And during the course of the process of actually writing the book, I made several references so that the reader, if they so were interested, they could actually follow up and do is the more of the the historical um, research themselves, to go back and take a look at it and see if what I was saying actually turned out to be the way it was. So I try to do that, make
We're
it
at
interesting.
we're Yeah, definitely. And we're at that point where we need to take a break. But before we do, I have a quick question for you. When you did your research, did you find anything new that kind of surprised you about the history?
What I found was that though there was very much of the history that I could research, there were still the obvious gaps included, and were actually innate to all of the research that I did. And I didn't find anything completely different, but what I did was I did go into the little bit of a more of a detailed synopsis, if that's possible to say. And that was the challenge I had, was to make sure that the reader understood what I was saying from a historical standpoint, at the same time ensuring that there was a certain amount of veracity to what I was saying, so that I gave my book more credibility when it came to historical references.
Wonderful. Well, like I said, we're at that point. We do need to stop and take a break, and we'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to the Texas Author TV show. We have with us the new award-winning author for his series, Jasper. Bill Sanford is his name. And we were talking about the first two books, and now we're going to move into the third and fourth book in this segment. So let's go ahead and go into book number 3. Let's hear what you have to say about this one.
Okay. Well, this next um, book, the name is The Treasure of the Clan. Okay. And this is, I thought this book to be very interesting from the standpoint of more current history. In the first two books, obviously the reader would be, well, from the standpoint of writing it, there wasn't as much information as I would like to have had to begin with. There just isn't a lot of history when you go back 3,000 years that is written. But from this point forward, the books take on a different aspect. They become not only more readable, I think, but more understandable, because they're a lot more contemporary with our current era. So it begins with the idea that Jasher has taken on obviously some serious new assignments here, and it begins interestingly enough with the Spanish uh, conquest of the New World. And there's some interesting things there which I was able to find historically, and I think it gives an interesting understanding, I think, of the Spanish civilization, the Spanish Inquisition era, as well as the conquest of the New World. and I had an interesting time doing that. I lived 2 years in Mexico, so there was a certain amount of sentimental attachment there to that particular book. And so I learned the language, and I learned a lot about the culture when I was there. And I had that opportunity, and so I decided to implement a lot of the ideas, thoughts, and considerations were for this particular book. So I was very pleased with that.
And that period ends after the discovery of the New World, or does it go a little further than that?
That's pretty much the way it ends, that particular book, The Treasure of the Clan. And it talks a lot about how uh, the Spanish conquest began actually with the Spaniards seeking opportunities to expand their empire. And in order to do that, they had to find a means whereby they could bankroll, you might say, their expeditions. And so they had to reach out to some interesting bankers along the way. And so they borrowed quite a bit of money from the um, Italian bankers during that time period. And as a result of that, they were able to go to the New World. They were able to uh, find all that they needed to do there as well. And they obviously they conquered the New World, or they should say that along with some of the other as well. We find the conquistador, um, Hernan Cortez, and he has an interesting life that I didn't really understand before. And I've made sure that readers understood that this was an unusual person. At the same time, he had some unusual faults, shall we say, and challenges later on in his life. So yeah, I was very interested in that particular time period because, like I say, I'd had an opportunity to go through that area of the world and live there, and it really was a way to make a strong connection with that type of book.
So with the fourth book, where do you start this one off at?
Okay, fourth book starts up with the now what I'm saying is behind all of this intrigue that's going on in the second, third, and now the fourth book, you have the character Cain in his you might say his brotherhood, and the brotherhood being the scar of Cain. And this particular brotherhood at this particular time, by this time, had well established itself into most civilizations. And this particular the brotherhood, the scar of Cain, was there on hand to begin a lot of the wars. For example, the first war being the Crimean War. Okay, later on we get to the Civil War, and that's very much where we end up right there. I tried very much to relate how he delved into these various different civilizations, these various different countries and nations that were um, just that particular time was building up their nation, and he was able to move and to expand his his clan, his brotherhood through that process. And but like I say, it's interesting. I was able to go into a lot of historical references there with the Crimean War, which I knew almost very little about at the time. And it turns out to be a very interesting one because it wasn't so much the war itself, but what was going on behind the scenes that was the most interesting. And then, of course, the Civil War, which was again bankrolled by Cain, who had changed his name by this time to a more anglicized type of name. What was it? The name? That's right, Walker Cain. And Walker Cain was head of the organization, still was at the time. And so, using his influence, he created various different civilizations. And the one being that he was able to bankroll the not only the Crimean War, which occurred in the late 1830s, but also the Civil War later on. And that, of course, led to other incursions in not only mostly in Europe at that time, because he was so successful at bankrolling the Civil War and had so much success gaining all the treasure or whatever he needed to continue to finance his quest for world dominion. And so he was using these wars in order to get richer. And so obviously he had a vested interest in how these wars turned out, which, like I say, will be, which will actually come to, which I'll be able to talk to you a little bit more in the fifth book. But it ends during the end of the Civil War. And there's a lot of interesting pieces there. The one of them. Oh, and of course, how could I forget that? All right. At the end of the Civil War, there was the expansion of the Americans. As you probably know, it's a go west, young man, kind of a inspiration that they were going through at that time. And so that's pretty much what it was all about. Jasher, Benjamin Jasher at this time, is he actually was able to place his manuscripts in the western part of the United States. And so he makes the trip, quest, or you might say the adventure, more than anything else. But he takes a group of people to the west coast of the United States, into the far western part of far eastern part of California, up in the Sierras. And that's where he had laid his tablets, his records were all in a large cave at the top of a very large mountain. And so in the fourth book, he goes west with his new with the new records that he had made, as he monitored the process of the wars that Cain had created over in Europe, as well as the United States. And so it ends with Jasher and Cain having a one-up where they're together. And Cain, of course, was trying to destroy the records. That was what he was all about anyway, was making sure that there weren't any records or proof of his intervention. And so that was the kind of the end there, where Jasher and he actually meet. And of course, they had words, a nice way of putting it. And that's how the book ends, with Cain being set off back to the east, the east part of the United States, and Jasher continues his work going into the fifth book.
And we're going to stop right there,
Sure.
because it is time for us to take a break, and then we can come back and talk about the fifth book. We'll be right back.
Hit play, let's see. Texas Authors TV. Discover new authors, discover great books, any genre you love, come take a look. Hosted by fellow authors, real talk, real spark, quick fun spotlights, right from the start. Watch it anytime, share it when you do. Texas Authors TV.
Hi, and welcome back. This is your host, Beyond Bourgeois, and you are watching or listening to the Texas Authors TV show, and we greatly appreciate it. Today, we have with us Bill Sanford. We've been talking about his first four books, and now the final fifth book that he currently has. And you mentioned in the last segment of how Cain and Jasher had to have a little disagreement, and they separated, and that's where the fourth book ended. So, where do we begin on the fifth book?
Okay, well, following the fourth book, which which I had actually named The Journey West, we have the fifth book starting out in the early 20th century. Okay, again, Jasher is in the midst of, and then the fifth book is called The Sure Witness. Okay, The Sure Witness deals with the early part of the 20th century going forward. And of course, we're getting to the point now where we're getting a lot closer to our current time, so it's more contemporary. Most of the readers should be able to follow a lot of the information that I provide in the background as far as the backstory goes. And which is what I find most interesting, I think, about my book, which is pretty much like the Michener series of books that he wrote, was that there is a backstory, and that is the backstory is where Jasher and the two professors are translating the book. And as the books are translated, Jasher makes note to the professors of what's going on in the background. Okay. And so the background is the actual conversation but him and the professors. The dialogue that we get into, as far as the individual dialogues of the characters during those eras, we pick up inside the actual front story. And so during this the last segment of the book here, the last book is the Sure Witness. The Sure Witness talks about the early 20th century, like I was talking about, in the early 1900s. And as you can imagine, there are a considerable amount of wars going on during the 20th century. And the first one being the World War I, but there's a segment there. It is obviously World War II following it 20 years later. And how Cain is his society by this time has truly grown and it's truly spread throughout the world. And so he is very highly motivated and interested in making sure those records never come to light. And so that's really what's going on in the last book, is that this is Walker Cain's big move toward destroying those books. I mean, the records themselves. And then also a bit at this time, Benjamin Jasher and the professors are getting together and they're trying to finish up the whole series of books and to publish them to the world, so that the world can see what Cain has been up to for the past 4,000 years. And so that's pretty much what the book is about there. We get to the point where after World War I, but of course you follow in with World War II and some of the other conflicts that have been going on since that particular period of time. And all this time, Cain is getting more and more impatient. He needs those records. He realizes Jasher sooner or later is going to get around to publishing them. So he is highly active at going in there and just disrupting that process. And so he does make a move. And short of telling you what the conclusion is, I'll just say that it's in a very interesting sort of way. It does come together. And in the end, of course, the bad guy loses and the good guy wins. And I think the reader will appreciate the ending, as it does put things together rather nicely. And at the end, Jasher is able to publish his books to the world. And of course, Cain, because he is exposed for what he is has been, you might say, sidelined, minimized. Okay. And so,
And I bet it's only a temporary sideline as well and stuff. And I have to cut you off, unfortunately, because we're almost out of time.
yeah, I know I'm a big
And
talker. Go ahead.
that's all right. And I wanted to make sure that we got people to
Yeah.
come to your website. So tell us what your website is.
Okay. Well, the readers can find my books at the following places: the Amazon Kindle platform. I have paperback, ebook and audiobooks for the first one, and I've paperback books for all the other four. But you can find all my books on Amazon Kindle under my name, Bill W. Sanford. Also at Barnes & Noble and Goodreads. And you can find a greater encapsulation, I think, of my series at my website, which I think will be very important, as well as very interesting to people who want to know a little bit more about the books and how to reach them. My website is www.billwsanford.org. Okay.
Alrighty. And on your website, do you list when you're doing events and stuff, different book festivals, so they can come and meet you?
Exactly. That's part of my process right there. And I have my website is a work in progress because my wife is
It always is.
never really satisfied. So yes, that's what we'll be doing. And of course, the upcoming book fair, I believe that you mentioned before that it was in May or June.
June, right.
June.
And
Okay, fine.
actually, yeah, the Lone Star Festival, which people can learn about on here. So real quickly, I have to ask this question. It sounds like for the most part, the story ends in book 5, but yet it seems open to a possible book 6, is it?
Well, that has always been a possibility, and it may very well go that direction, assuming how much readership actually I find with the first 5 books. But yeah, it's left open, and I make that very obvious, I think, at the end of the series, that the possibility is open. And Benjamin Jasher will have a slightly different role in that if I go into the next books series. Okay.
That's a perfect spot for us to end the show. I want to thank you very much for being with us, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate what you did here and provided me the opportunity to meet with you on your podcast. And to my readers, I hope you enjoy the books. I think you will. Thank you.
Texas Authors TV is produced by B. Allen Bourgeois for the Texas Authors Museum. Copyright 2026. If you would like to become a sponsor, please email us at texasauthors@outlook.com. If you would like to be on the show, please email us at texasauthors@outlook.com. Music is Frolic of Words, created for the show